that you can see it.
I can see it.
Good. So the floor is yours.
All right. So thank you everyone who's interested in studying in the United States. When people come in for their visa interview, they're obviously, well, nervous, but also really excited about the opportunity to travel to the United States and study, whether it's studying to improve their English, or whether it's studying for a master's degree, bachelor's degree, PhD, whatever it might be. And yeah, all right. So Ina already introduced me, but if you weren't here for the introduction, my name is Kat, and I work in the consular section with visas and with American Citizen Services. Yep. All right, so what is a student visa? I think there's some, I know that this was new for me when I started working in the consular section. I just assumed a visa meant that you could enter a country, but it's actually permission to apply for entry to the United States. So a student visa would be permission to apply to enter the United States as a student. What a visa, okay, if you can mute your microphone. Thanks. Okay. What a visa is not, it does not guarantee entry into the United States, and it does not determine the length of time that you may stay in the United States. Okay, so on the screen here, we just have the different types of student visas that we have. Many of you may or may not be aware of them. I believe most of you are here for the student F1 visa, but we also have an exchange visitor visa, which some people do academic, well, they do research, they could do research on it, and then a vocational or non-academic student for an M1 visa. So we're just going to go through some, do some myth busting for the next little bit, and then we'll get into the bulk of the presentation. So I already answered this. Is it true that if I'm accepted, oh no, I didn't answer this, I'm sorry. So is it true that if I'm accepted to a US university, I'll be issued a student visa? Unfortunately, that's not the case. Even if you're admitted to a US university, you still have to apply for a visa, and it's up to the adjudicating officer to determine whether you are eligible for the visa that would allow you to study in the United States. Okay, Ina, next one, please. All right, so myths versus realities. Okay, so myth. The United States sets a limit on the number of foreign students that can study in the United States. This is not true. You can click it again. I'm sorry, it would have, unfortunately, I'm not able to run the PowerPoint myself, but so there's no limit to the number of student visas that the US can issue. So if you're a qualified student visa applicant, we want you to pursue that opportunity and not be concerned that there's not enough visas available or for you to be accepted or to be issued a visa. Okay, next one. All right. So the next myth is that international students are not permitted to work while visiting the United States on a student visa. So there are definitely some restrictions on working, but it's not, what is the word? Prohibited. So there are some job opportunities that are possible, particularly on campus, and you are limited, well, because you're a student and that's your primary purpose of being in the United States. Your ability to work in the United States is limited in hours, because again, the reason you're there is to study and not for work purposes. So there are some restrictions on this, and after you've completed 9 months of consecutive study, there is the possibility that you would be able to work off campus in a different capacity. But again, you're still limited to the amount of hours that you're able to work as a student, okay? All right, so it is not true that you must have your entire future planned to get a visa. When I am interviewing people for visas, it really depends on like what level of study you're doing that I'm interested in hearing about your travel plan or your study plan. So for example, if you're applying for a bachelor's degree and you're only 18 or even 17, like I understand that you may not know exactly what you're going to study. I understand that you might not have concrete plans for what you're going to do after you graduate. But we're still going to have a conversation about it. And yeah, but then if you're pursuing a PhD, my expectation for what you're going to tell me is completely different. If you're doing a PhD, you should clearly be able to explain what you're going to be studying and what the practical applications for your studies will be and what you're planning to do post your academic career, right? Yeah, okay. All right, another myth. So only the best students get visas. This isn't true. In fact, I almost never ask to look at grades, so I don't necessarily know how you did in your high school or how you did in your undergraduate. If I suspect that maybe you didn't do that well, then maybe I would ask to look at grades, but really I'm not. I'm looking at like the university that you applied to and what your plans for the future are, and if you can speak credibly about them. Because again, this is a student visa, so we want to make sure that you are a credible student and that you're not just going to the United States as a student in order to go do something else like work. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to apply for a visa. So on the screen, you'll see our website that you can click on so that you can apply. So on the website, you'll apply online and you'll pay the visa fee and schedule an appointment online. You want to make sure that you're scheduling well ahead of time. If you are interested in how long the wait times are, you can visit travel.state.gov. You might have to click around a little bit, but there's a place where you can look at wait times for Armenia, and it's broken down by visa class. So whether it's for a tourist visa or whether it's for a student visa, it's a different wait time. And we definitely try and prioritize appointments for students because we know that, I mean, it's a priority for the US government. We want to facilitate that, that travel and study in the United States. Okay. All right. So, oh, yep. So now you can see what it looks like when you click on it. So on the day of your interview, what should you bring? You must bring a valid passport. We can't issue a visa if you don't have a valid passport, but also you'll be required to bring it in order to gain access to the embassy. You should bring your application confirmation page, and definitely a valid I-20. This is a certificate that's issued by the school or university or program sponsor, and it talks about the length of the program and the type of the program that you'll be doing. And it also discusses funding for like how you will be paying for the program, which is really plays a fairly large part of the interview. You'll also need to bring a recent color photo. It shouldn't be older than 6 months. We have the requirements listed on our website. If you want more information about it, it's clearly listed on our website. Just a tip, if you go to a typical photo place in Yerevan, you have to specify that you need 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters because a passport photo here is different sized than a passport photo that we need, that would be a typical passport photo in the United States. And then you'll also need to print off your proof of payment of the SEVIS fee and any other supporting documentation. So supporting documentation would be different. I'm not sure if it's on the next slide. Nope, it's not. So, oh yes, it is. So on the next slide. So again, it really sort of depends on what level of study you're going to be doing. So it doesn't hurt to bring the academic transcripts, although I've never looked at them, but another officer might. And then especially if you're doing a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, the officer may be interested in looking at your standardized tests. Well, yeah, okay. And then financial documents are important. Some officers don't even look at them because it's fairly easy to fake financial documents or transfer a large amount of money into a bank from your uncle and then transfer it back out immediately after your interview. So basically, we're just going to ask you some questions about your finances and how you're going to pay for the program. But that being said, you should still bring your information showing how you're going to pay for this. Okay. And then any other documentation or information that shows that you are coming back to Armenia. So like your ties to Armenia. I don't need to see your family's passports or anything like that. But, you know, if you own a house or an apartment in Yerevan, or if you have a lot of land outside of the city, it might be valuable to bring evidence of that to the interview to show that like you have, or a business, like you have this business and it's going to be running while you're gone and you're getting income from it, but also like it shows that you have ties to Armenia that you're going to come back to. All right.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sorry, we will take the question at the end of the session. So please write your questions in the chat box, or at the end of the session, you can unmute yourself and speak. We'll take questions by the end of presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so what is the SEVIS? So this is a system it's a system to record information about students and exchange visitors and to track them as they enter the US and during their program and the completion of their program. So it basically is a platform for schools to send information to the US Immigration Service, basically showing that you're complying. So maybe you apply for the visa and pay the SEVIS fee, but then maybe you never travel to the United States because a pandemic, for example, or something comes up and you decide not to study. So the university or school would notify US Immigration and notify the embassy that you didn't show up for your program. It would also notify us, like if maybe you studied for a semester and then you just stopped going to class, it might notify us for that. But all exchange visitors and students have to pay this SEVIS fee before applying. All right, so how to qualify for a non-immigrant visa. So it's really on you, the applicant, to prove that you're not trying to just move to the United States. Okay, so you're showing your ties to the United States. So it could be professional, financial, social, family ties. I'm sorry, ties to Armenia, not to the United States. And as I said before, documentation can be helpful, but we're not looking for one specific document. And if, for example, we ask you for some document that you didn't bring, don't panic. We can basically put your application on hold and then tell you how you can provide that information to us. So for example, if we ask for, I don't know, your advisor, you're getting a PhD and we ask for your advisor's CV, but you didn't bring it or you left it at home or whatever, it's okay. You can send it to us. It doesn't mean that you failed or didn't get the visa, okay? So at the interview, I know you're nervous. It's okay. We all understand that this is a really important interview for you, and it can have lifelong implications. Well, not a lot of pressure or anything, right? But it's really important to always tell the truth. So not just at the interview, but if you get the visa and then at immigration control, it's really important, because if we find out that you didn't tell the truth, then you may be barred from getting a visa forever, okay? It's also important to note that you don't need to pay somebody to complete your application. I see so many applications filled out that are filled out incorrectly or not complete, and it's best if you just do it yourself. And in my opinion, best if you just do it yourself and make sure that it's completed accurately and completed, instead of leaving a lot of does not apply. It's an option. If you don't fill something out, you can just write does not apply, but we don't want to see that. We want to see all the information that we ask for. Okay. Of course, don't fall victim to anyone who tells you to use fake documents. Again, it could jeopardize future travel to the United States. The other thing about telling the truth, if, for example, you interview, let's say you interview with me, and you tell me something and I write it in the case notes, and then I decide not to issue you the visa. And then let's say in like 3 months, you decide to interview again. You would not interview with me, but let's say you interview with my colleague and he's asking you questions and you're telling a totally different story, but he can see from my notes that you told me one thing and you're telling him another, and then you don't really seem like a credible applicant, and we don't know what's the truth. And so you probably won't get the visa. Okay, next one. Fees. So it doesn't cost anything to schedule your your interview appointment, but you do have to pay the visa application fee in order to schedule the appointment. And that was on the website that I showed you many slides ago, which we'll make available for you. And then you also have to pay the SEVIS fee, which the local staff will check when you come in, and then the adjudicating officer will check again during your interview to make sure that the fee was paid. All right, so the next, we're going to talk about working as a student. I know this is a lot of monologuing, so sorry. Oh, maybe it's not there. Can you go back? Oh, maybe it's missing. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this is 100% full disclosure, not my area of expertise about your ability to work as a student. But for the first year of study, you can only work at the university. And then after your first year of academic study, you can have the ability to work off campus. My understanding is that you have to apply for, let's see, off-campus employee authorization. And then after you receive authorization from USCIS, you can't work more than 20 hours per week during when school is in session. Okay, and lots of students will, and I'm not totally sure the logistics behind this, but a lot of students who study for their bachelor's or for their master's, they'll do a year or two of OPT, which is optional practical training, which is on the next slide. All right, so can you move ahead? Thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, after 9 months of higher learning, so not if you're doing a language program, but if you're doing a bachelor's or a master's or even a PhD, oh, it looks like master's or PhD, you don't have to wait, but for a bachelor's, you do have to wait at least 9 months. And then you can work, you have a right to work for 1 year on or off campus. Usually what I see is people who will do OPT, optional practical training, after they've graduated, and they'll do it, and then because it provides an opportunity for them to work full-time in a company that they're interested in working for. So like Amazon or Google or, you know, a variety of other places. Yes. And then, okay, when to travel. So we can issue the visa, I believe it's up to 180 days before you study. However, you're only allowed to enter the United States 30 days before the start of the program, which will be, it'll tell you that on your I-20 or DS 2019. So the I-20 is for if you're doing like a academic program, like on an F1 visa, and a DS 2019 would be if you're doing some sort of exchange program or a research program on a J1 visa. Oh, and it says the visa can be issued up to 121 days, not 180, excuse me, 120. All right, so so you're allowed to leave the United States as a student However, when you return to the United States on your student visa, your visa has to be valid for the current program of study, and it needs to be valid, a passport has to be valid for at least 6 months at the time of entry. And of course, you need to show your I-20 again and your SEVIS payment receipt. If you leave, as a student, if you leave your studies for more than 5 months, then you have to apply for a new visa because your SEVIS status would no longer be valid. All right. So I think this is a little confusing, the visa validity piece. Especially, I think it's particularly confusing for tourists who are issued 10-year visas, because that does not mean that you get to stay in the United States for 10 years. So, but for students, the visa validity is the time that you can travel to the United States and request admission. So once, let's say you have a 2-year visa, but your program's 4 years. You can stay, assuming that you're paroled in by USCIS or Customs and Border Patrol, you can stay the full 4 years. But if you leave after that 2 years, because the validity of your visa is no longer, you have to apply for a new visa. Okay, but most students, especially academic, like more than language students, would be issued, my understanding is they'd be issued a visa with the full validity, or up to 60 months, okay? And then after your program's over, you can stay up to 60 days from the program, final date of your program, as stated on the I-20. But then if you're doing a J1, so again, that could be research or some sort of exchange program, you can only stay for 30 days after, okay? And you always need to leave before the date listed on your I-94 admission record. This is what the amount of time that Customs and Border Patrol allows you to stay. So when you enter the United States, they basically give you a amount of time that you can stay in the United States, okay? All right. We're almost to question answer, I promise. So this page just tells you how you can get more information. As of Monday, we no longer have an email inbox. In fact, the local staff just finished a training about 20 minutes ago about how to use our new, I can't call it an email platform, but it's a new platform for how you would get information that you are not finding. If you're not finding it on our website or on travel.state.gov, you can send inquiries and it will be responded to. But this tinyurl.com is where you'll go to ask those questions.